In the US, we get 90 days to return a lamp we buy at Target. An Unwed mother in Korea gets 0 time to go back to the agency to say, I want my child back. To search for mother's body is to listen with a poet's attention that can rub across the word surfaces to listen for a pulse, not the shuffling of documents. Mother, you sit across from a social worker, a woman your same age speaking Korean because you are Korean, flipping through pages and indicating where you should sign. You're pregnant, heavy with me during your 6th month, leaning slightly backward because your lower back aches. This social worker, maybe a mother herself, disassociates from the fact that your bodies, sitting so close to each other, can do the same work. Your pen following the social worker's finger, indicating where you should leave your mark. Your pen pointing to where the social worker flagged for your signature. Your bodies so close to each other that they become one body, linked together through paper, one that gives and one that takes away. You're silent because in Korea, a parent is a father who recognizes and takes care of his child. The social worker knows this and continues to smile. Her child registered in ancestral rolls that date to the 14th century in Andongshi. Above you, the Virgin Mary looks beyond the frame's gilt edge, and the social worker's desk, a wedding photo, and a little boy laughing and running toward the camera. His right hand holds a red-stitched baseball. The social worker, anxious to return home, checks the paperwork and clips it inside a brown folder marked with a case number. She puts her hand on your shoulder to reassure you. You lean against a mother who wants to get home to her child in Samsungdong, who doesn't see you as a mother. You blur together, when taking, when giving me away. What proof do I have that this is your story? I can only see the space. Here's a round black table, a set of gray office chairs upholstered in the Danish functional style. Here's a tissue box, a beige telephone with a red button to place a call on hold. Here are the fluorescent lights. I can hear typing next door. White industrial linoleum flecked with multicolored chips doesn't muffle noise. Color portraits of joyful adoptive parents show mothers what they can't give. Tan metal file cabinets. A water cooler dispenses hot and cold. A box of Maxim coffee sticks. Styrofoam cups. English tea. I can see the conversations around this table. The frayed gray fabric, split orange foam, the cooler's cloudy plastic, and water damage stains on the ceiling. You would have been childbearing age, anywhere from 18 to 45, and so capable of working in one of many light industrial factories constructed during Park Chung-hee's regime, when South Korea engineered its economic miracle on your back, leaning over a steady conveyor belt of t-shirts, tennis shoes, toys, toothbrushes, combs, and plastic mirrors created for export. Your hands rush to keep up with the manufacturing speedway toward South Korea's revolution, from an agriculture-based nation to an economic tiger. You're a farmer's daughter from Jeollado or Gangwon-do, or maybe one of Seoul's own, simply wanting to earn some money for the family back home, still squatting in an unheated room to shower with a hose. So when the social worker asks if you would sign here, you watch your hand move, knowing that you will say nothing to your father or mother who take the money to buy food and encourage you to eat well. You eat in silence that night. You feed us both with your grief. What am I saying? I can only describe a researched context, a slanted window. I can only speculate and dramatize because I can't find you. Is this a fetish or a document of desire? This is not your body. This is not mine. This is my tongue, meat flapping inside my crushed mouth. The military meat that Korea imports from the US, spam, variety meats, mad cow, neoliberal trade, ends up in budae-jjigae, a stew of scraps. One of the longest muscles in the body, the tongueless heaven, earth, and man, when it speaks Korean letters shaped accordingly. 남이 가져가지 하고 있는 숭이대 혹시 사유를 모을 수 있을까요? Can we see documents? Do you have documents? I don't want constellations. Which story is mine? Which story is yours? Mapping and recentering. My documents are your documents, aren't they? The words that took me from you had first to admit that I belong to you, that you're woman's flesh, not a social artifact, even as they erased your name. I don't know your name. I only know this body that came from yours. I only know this page. I tried to rewrite this language that took my body away from your body, knowing that I will only clear this page of fetishes you would never use for yourself. Birth mother, gift giver, social artifact, dead memory, trace, smear, signature. Not applicable, unknown, even mother. No, Umuni, you wouldn't have been dressed like these. And if I push through your skirts, I find blankness, the smoothness that is not your face. So in 2009, I traveled to Korea to do some research on a book project focusing on birth search politics and imagination. In particular, I was interested in how adoptees have used our birth searches as public pedagogy. Natalie Shiro talks a bit about how she's a scholar, Vietnamese adoptee and a warm friend. Anyway, shout out to Natalie, but hey Natalie. So Natalie talks about how adoptees have used birth searches as a way to educate the community. Not only to educate the community, but also to share information with other stakeholders like adoptive parents in order to talk about best practices. But beyond best practices, it served as a means to develop collective knowledge about our histories, where we come from, and how to understand our current moment. So I was really interested in that advocacy occurring out in Korea around our birth searches, and also using my own birth search as a way of learning more about how adoptees come to be. And so over the course of doing that research, I was very lucky to be hosted also by Korean Unwed Mothers Support Network, which is an organization out in Korea, started in 2008 by Dr. Richard Boas. He's an adoptive parent of a Korean adoptee, and he started Korean Unwed Mothers Support Network after learning more about where adoptees are coming from, learning more about unwed mothers' issues. So since the mid-80s, predominantly adoptees have been coming from unwed moms. In fact, 90% of children sent overseas for adoption come from unwed mothers, and their births only constitute 1 to 1.25% of all of Korea's live births. So we're looking at a tiny population who nonetheless continue to provide, because of social injustices out in Korea, who continue to provide children, providing for the fulfillment of adoption out here in the United States. Korea continues to be a top 4 sending country. So we're looking at a tiny percentage of births that are still perpetuating Korea's top 5 status. So Dr. Bose was wondering, what is the story behind unwed mothers? How can we support unwed mothers? And that's when he formed KUMFA. Kwon, who is the coordinator out in Korea for KUMFA, was a very kind colleague who introduced me to the mothers who formed Miss Mamma Mia. And so out in 2009, when I was visiting Seoul and I was going to maternity homes like Doing Home, which is run by the Salvation Army, I also visited Aranwan. I got to know the mothers who were forming Miss Mamma Mia. And so after talking with the moms, learning more about their experiences, studying the issues around unwed mothers, social justice, I decided that a lot of work is already being done actually around birth search politics. And I wanted to shift gears and focus on supporting the mothers and putting a microphone under their voices to get their stories out. At the same time, I wanted to think about ways in which I, as a scholar and also an adoptee, who's a stakeholder, of course, within the larger adoption community, could create a framework to support mothers' justice in a sustainable fashion. So that's when I actually introduced the moms to TRAC, Truth and Reconciliation for the Adoption Community of Korea. And in July 2009, we had a coalition meeting whereby narrating my own birth search story, and Jane Jong-Trinka, who's the president of TRAC, narrating her own story. Although Jane didn't search, she nonetheless, of course, as an adoptee, has experiences that have been documented, of course, in her own memoirs. But anyway, narrating our stories and the mothers sharing their stories allowed us to reach common ground. Seeing how our stories were overlapping, how they were shaped by very similar forces that is privatized social welfare for children and unwed mothers, also known as adoption. And so that stakeholder meeting out in Darim-dong at the Single Mother Center led to Unwed Mom Adoptee Advocacy. So I'm really excited about some developments that have occurred recently out in Korea around unwed moms, adoptee advocacy. Some of the developments, for instance, recently there was a Single Mother's Day which TRAC created. It was the first ever holiday celebrating single mothers, families, recognizing their families as an important contribution to Korean society. On May 11th, which for the past 6 years the government has funded as Adoption Day, promoting domestic adoption. The irony around the government supporting domestic adoption is that with the current domestic adoption laws out in Korea, single parents who are 60 years older than the child may adopt the child. Korea, because there's so much stigma around unwed mothers, would rather separate an unwed mother, 80% of whom are older, age 25 and older, from their own children and place them in the care of parents who are single and who are 60 years older than the child, and provide $90 a month in support. So that disconnect to me seems very confusing and also at the same time really cruel.